So today we're going to look at multiple deposit expansions, which is when every time you make a deposit in a bank, some of your deposit goes into required reserves, which is what banks have to hold on to as set by the Federal Reserve, and the rest goes into excess reserves, which they can then loan out. When banks loan out these excess reserves, somebody else then takes that deposit and then can deposit into that loan and then can deposit into their bank, and that becomes new required reserves and excess reserves. So any one deposit, whether it's from an initial I found $100 on the ground and here's a deposit, or from a loan, then can be loaned out some more from banks. Banks give out loans as a way of making money. They are for-profit entities, and so the theory in macroeconomics is that since they are for-profit, they will always give out their excess reserves in loans. So it's a ripple effect. One deposit has many new loans created. And so using multiple deposit expansions, there are four types of formulas or four types of loans that can be discovered. It's a step process. So if you follow through the steps, you just have to really determine which step I need to stop at. All right. So the formulas or the different types will appear down below as we talk about them. So type 1 is discovering new excess reserves. So when the bank has to hold on to required reserves, can loan out the excess reserves. So if you make a deposit, we want to know the initial amount of that deposit that can go into excess reserves for the initial amount of new loans for that one bank. You find this by taking the amount of the new demand deposits and subtracting out the required reserves. And you find the required reserves by simply multiplying the amount of new deposits by the required reserve ratio. For example, if you were to deposit $100 and the required reserve ratio was 10%, $10 that's the required reserves, would be subtracted from the 100, and they would have a new $90 in excess reserves. Type 2 is finding out how much new loans the whole banking system has. So what is the complete ripple of new loans that can be made? You'd find this by taking that change in excess reserves that you had from the first deposit, so in this case the $90, and multiply it by the money multiplier. The money multiplier is found by 1 over the required reserve ratio. So with our example, it'd be 1 over 10%, or 1 over 1/10, or 1 over 0.1, however you want to see that. And so it would give you a money multiplier of 10. So you would take your $90, multiply it by your 10 money multiplier, and you would have $900 in max change in loans or new loans within the banking system as a whole. Type 3 is max change in the money supply. And this is how much the money supply will change as a result of all actions taken. So if it is the you or me depositing in the bank, well, our max change in new loans that we just did in type 2 and the max change in the money supply is going to be the same because our initial deposit had to have required reserves and excess reserves. If it's a Federal Reserve action, if they're the ones depositing money, that first amount actually is 100%, if it's done to a bank, is 100% excess reserves. So for type 3, you take your max change in new loans and you add in any Federal Reserve action back to it. So with our example, it was just you or me depositing $100, so the Federal Reserve action would be 0. If it had been the Federal Reserve, you would add the $100 back in. Type 4 is the max change in all demand deposits. So it doesn't matter if it's me, you, the Federal Reserve, or Bill Gates depositing the $100. It all goes into demand deposits on a bank's balance sheet. So you would add in the initial deposit. So you would take our $900 in max new loans that we got from type 2, add in the $100 of the initial deposit, and the max change in demand deposits would be 1,000. So type 1, initial change in excess reserves or loans for the bank. Type 2, max change, finding the ripple effect Type 3, max change in the money supply. You add in Federal Reserve action. Type 4, max change in all demand deposits. So I have more notes on these with a step-by-step example that will be shared with the link in the description. So